Hiding from the Nazis by David Adler and illustrated by Karen Ritz. Ernst Bayer was born in Germany in 1907. His parents and grandparents had been born there too. The Bayers were loyal Germans, but in 1933, because he was Jewish, Ernst Bayer felt he had to leave his homeland. That January, Adolf Hitler, who was head of the Nazi Party, had become Chancellor, leader of the German government. Soon after he became Chancellor, Jewish-owned stores were boycotted. Books written by Jews were burned. Jews were fired from their jobs. Jews Not Wanted signs were posted everywhere. Ernst Bayer no longer felt safe. He left his home, job, and the woman he loved, Edith Schmidt, and moved to Amsterdam, Holland. There, he and his friend Herbert Gottschall opened a butcher shop. In 1934, Edith Schmidt joined Ernst in Amsterdam. They married, and with Herbert and his wife Erna, they rented a small house near the butcher shop. The Bayers were glad they had moved to Amsterdam. During the next few years, more anti-Jewish laws were passed in Germany. Jews were no longer citizens. They were not even allowed to fly a German flag. Thousands of German Jews moved to Holland, but the hatred the Bayers escaped in Germany was spreading. In the years since the Bayers and the Gottschalls came to Amsterdam, Adolf Hitler was preparing for war. In March 1938, he sent German troops into neighboring Austria and declared it part of Greater Germany. In the fall of 1938, Germany took over the Sudetenland, a section of Czechoslovakia. On September 1st, 1939, German troops invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. In 1938, the year of Germany's takeover of Austria and the Sudetenland, the Gottschalls and Bayers each had a baby. Herbert Gottschall never saw his only child. Early in 1938, he suddenly died of a heart attack. His son Hans was born a few weeks later in March. Edith and Ernst Bayer's daughter, Lore, was born in August. Soon after Lore Bayer was born, her grandfather, Julius Schmidt, came to visit. Edith Bayer was glad to have her father out of Germany. She convinced him to stay in Amsterdam, where she was sure he would be safe. Julius Schmidt moved into the same house with the Bayers and Gottschalls. During the day, while Ernst and Edith were at the butcher shop, he took care of Lore. He pushed her carriage, and when Lore was older, they held hands and took long walks together. Lore loved her grandfather. She called him Opa. Lore loved to play, too. She and Hans shared toys, played house and doctor, and Lore's favorite game, hide and seek. Her best hiding place was under a blanket. On May 10, 1940, German forces invaded Holland. A few days later, the armies of Holland surrendered. Queen Wilhelmina and members of her government escaped to Britain. Ernst Bayer wanted to leave too. He tried to get visas for himself and the others, but representatives of the United States and Cuba refused him. Nazis followed the German army into Holland. First came anti-Jewish laws. Jews could only shop between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. Their property was taken away. They lost their jobs. And beginning in May 1942, they were forced to wear a yellow star so everyone would know who was a Jew. Then there were arrests. The arrested Jews were sent to Westerbroek, a transit and work camp in northeastern Holland. From there, most were taken to death camps, to Auschwitz and Sobibor, where they were killed. At first, the Nazis took only out-of-work Jews. Then they took everyone. In March 1943, there was a loud knock on the Bayers' door. 2 uniformed Nazis with guns pushed their way into the house. Lore ran behind the staircase and hid. The Nazis showed Edith Bear some papers. They had come for Opa. Edith Bear cried. She pleaded with the Nazis to spare her father. "You can't take him," she screamed. "You can't!" But they did. Edith, Ernst, and Lore Bear never saw Opa again. Opa was held at Westerbrook for a few months. From there he was taken to Germany, to Bergen-Belsen, a concentration camp for Jewish prisoners, where he died. Edith and Ernst Bear and Erna Gottschall knew the Nazis would be back. They decided to hide. They felt it would be safest if the children and their parents didn't hide together. The Bears told Lore they were taking her to the apartment of Elsie and Sam Isaacs, a couple they knew from the butcher shop. But they didn't tell her why. They didn't want to frighten her. They just said, "Don't tell anyone your name is Bear, and don't tell anyone you're Jewish." Sam Isaacs was Jewish. His wife was Christian, but they had papers saying they were both Christians. The Isaacs promised to take care of Lore. "Be good," Edith and Ernst told Lore. "We'll see you soon." Then they were gone. Lore was frightened. She was just 4.5 years old. She didn't know why her parents had given her away. She thought she had done something wrong. Lore was with the Isaacs for just 1 week. Then the Isaacs started to worry that their neighbors might find out they were hiding a Jewish child, or that Sam was Jewish. During the next few weeks, they moved Lore several times, but Nazis were everywhere. Every day, there were more arrests. No hiding place in Amsterdam seemed safe. In April 1943, Sam Isaacs took Lore by train to Hoorn, the center of Dutch farm country. 2 men on bicycles met them at the station. They told Lore her name would now be Lore Kruk. Then one of them put Lore on the handlebars of his bicycle and rode her to a new hiding place, the Schouten farm in nearby Oosterblokker. People there didn't ask many questions about Lore. When they did, Ma and Pa Schouten said she was their niece and that her parents had to move to find work. When the little girl's parents were settled, they would come back for her. The Schoutens had 5 grown children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. Their youngest daughter, Cornelia, was in her early 20s. She shared her room with Lore. Cornelia was like a mother to her. At night, Lore was often frightened. She was sure that when she closed her eyes, Cornelia would leave too. Cornelia held Lore so she could sleep. The Schouten farm was a new world to Lore. She had been a city girl. Before she came to Oosterblokker, she had never seen cows, sheep, or so much grass. She loved to run across the open fields. Cornelia taught Lore how to milk cows, bake bread, churn butter, and make cream. On Sundays, Lore went with the Schoutens to church, and beginning in 1944, she went to the church school. The children at the school didn't know Lore was Jewish, but the pastor did. He made sure Lore was safe. Lore wasn't the only one hiding at the Schoutens. People running from the Nazis often stopped there and stayed for a while. Nazis came, too. If there was a warning that Nazis were coming, Cornelia quickly took Lore by bicycle to the next town, to Cornelia's sister's house. There they waited until it was safe to go back. Sometimes there was no time to get away. Then Lore was taken into a closet. Under the floorboards was a secret tunnel. It led to a large box in the barn, inside the hayloft. Hiding was no longer a game for Lore. She was frightened. Lore couldn't cough or sneeze. She had to remain very quiet so the Nazis wouldn't hear her. Lore never hid alone. There were always other people with her inside the hayloft, but she couldn't see them. Sometimes she wondered if her parents were there, hiding with her in the dark. Lore's second winter in hiding, the winter of 1944-1945, was a difficult one. Many people in Holland were without food. They came to the Dutch farmland with money, silver, jewelry, and other valuables, hoping to trade for something to eat. The Schoutens wouldn't take unfair payment from their countrymen. They gave their food generously. But when Nazis and German soldiers came for food, the Schoutens said they had nothing, that the milk had gone sour, and their crops had spoiled. By mid-1944, Germany was losing the war. On April 25, 1945, Russian forces surrounded Berlin, Germany's capital. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler killed himself. 8 days later, May 8, 1945, was VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. The armies of many nations had united to defeat the German army. The Schoutens celebrated the end of the war. A few days later, Cornelia told Lore that her parents were coming to take her home. Lore was confused. She felt the farm was her home. She wanted to stay with Cornelia and the Schoutens. She wanted to stay in Oosterblokker. Edith and Ernst Bear had dreamed for 2 years about the day they would see their child again. They thought Lore would run into their arms. She didn't. When the bears came for Lore, she hid again, this time from her parents. Lore hid behind her beloved Cornelia. Edith and Ernst Bear stayed with the Schoutens for a few days, so Lore would become comfortable with them. They explained to Lore that she had done nothing wrong. They had brought her to the Isaacs so she would be safe, because they loved her. Edith and Ernst had been hiding near Oosterblokker. After VE Day, they contacted Elsie and Sam Isaacs, who told them where to find Lore. Lore's friend, Hans Gottschall, and his mother Erna also survived. Hans had hidden with a Christian family in The Hague, the capital city of Holland. Erna hid too in the Amsterdam apartment of a Christian woman she knew from the butcher shop. A uniformed Nazi, a member of the feared SS squad, lived in the building. Erna Gottschall could not move freely in the apartment. She had to keep away from windows. She never went outside. After a few days at the Schoutens, Edith, Ernst, and Lore Bear returned to Amsterdam. They were done hiding. They were together again. In 1947, the Bears moved to the United States. Even here, Edith Bear was afraid of losing her child again. Each morning before school, Edith made Lore promise to wave to her at lunchtime. Edith worked in a nearby factory, and every day at noon, she stopped work and looked out the window for Lore. It took Lore many years to learn to trust and love her parents again, but at least she was safe. She had survived the Holocaust. Author's note: before the German invasion in May 1940, there were 140,000 Jews living in Holland. Of this number, 23,000 were refugees from Germany. One of the first Nazi decrees in Holland was that all Jews who had entered the country after January 1933 be sent to concentration camps and their property confiscated. This led to the arrest of Julia Schmidt, Lore's beloved Opa. Of the Jews living in Holland, between 106,000 to 107,000 were sent to Nazi death camps, where more than 100,000 of them were murdered. Some Jews were able to leave the country. An estimated 22,000 to 25,000 Jews hid, and almost half of them survived the war. The Gottschalls moved to the United States in 1947, the same year the Bears came here. The Baer and Gottschall families have remained close friends. In 1950, the Baers had a second child, Lillian. Laura Baer works now as an artist and an art therapist. She is a wife, mother, and grandmother. She has gone back to Osterblocker a few times to visit and to thank the Shoutons for opening their hearts and their home to her, for saving her life. At a 1992 session, the Commission for the Designation of the Righteous chose to honor Theodorus, Pa, Maria, Ma, and Cornelia Shouton with the Medal of the Righteous among the Nations. Their names were engraved on the honor wall in the Garden of the Righteous at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, Israel. In March 1995, for their noble deeds, they were made honorary citizens of Israel.